only one of many. In fact, the landscape can hold as many as 10 to the 500th power different landscapes, different universes. This number is truly ungraspable. It is so much larger than anything we can possibly even imagine that it's pretty breathtaking that he puts that, but that's how it is when you get into infinity. Just a couple of ideas I want to share from Susskind to let you know some of the rocking revelations that are coming out now in cosmology, physics, and what it might have to do with the quantum also. Susskind notes on page 20 here, he says, the narrow 20th century paradigm of a single universe, about 10 billion years old and 10 billion light years across, with a unique set of physical laws, is giving way to something much bigger and pregnant with new possibilities. Gradually, cosmologists and physicists like myself are coming to see our 10 billion light years as an infinitesimal pocket of a stupendous megaverse. Now, the 20th, this is so fascinating, the 20th century narrow-mindedness of just our universe, just to let you know, with 6 billion people on the earth, our universe would have 4 trillion stars, or 20 galaxies the size of our Milky Way, for each 6 billion people. And yet this was narrow-minded thinking in the 20th century. And I agree with Susskind. It was narrow-minded based on the cosmology that he's bringing out now in this magnificent read, The Cosmic Landscape. That is narrow, and that's so mind-boggling you can't hardly fathom it. I mean, this is how much expansion in our ability to conceive of new ideas with our understanding of the universe now is so much grander, and yet that narrow-minded thinking in the 20th century caused people to disbelieve in God. They said, oh, well, yeah, we can't see God in this universe. And now the universe is considered a mere speck of dust in a megaverse. And of course, the cosmologists, they're going to keep thinking, well, yeah, we can't see God in any of the megaverse either. Well, no, they can't. That's probably true. That shouldn't concern religionists much. The idea is we are developing ourselves to see things in new ways, grander visions. And there are some people coming around to showing that the coordination between science and religion is not such an odd affair. Even the coordination between religion and supposedly godless atheism, the belief in evolution does not preclude a logical conclusion to atheism at all, and I'll get into that. Probably another podcast. There's so many podcasts I got to do. This is fun stuff. Well, on page 21, Susskind says, an outgrowth of inflationary theory. Now, he is advocating an inflationary universe theory called eternal inflation, is demanding that the world be a megaverse full of pocket universes that have bubbled up out of inflating space. Very interesting ideas on how we're now discussing worlds, infinite worlds. Well, this is the ancient cosmology of the ancients as they received it through revelation. I refer you to our book of Moses. Yeah, very interesting now. Well, on page 25 or on page 65, he notes when he first got his job, he ran into a group of physicists, and it was in a dirty little office. He said, I recognized Dave Finkelstein, and Dave arranged his job. Very interesting. I also saw Paul Dirac, arguably the greatest theoretical physicist of the 20th century after Einstein. Dave introduced me to Yakir Aronov, and he was talking to Roger Penrose, who is now Sir Roger. Roger and Dave are two of the most important pioneers in the theory of black holes. I saw Joel Lebowitz. Joel, a well-known mathematical physicist, was arguing with Elliot Lieb, whose name was also familiar. It was the most brilliant collection of physicists that had ever been assembled in one place, and he was invited to talk with them on his first day on the job as a physicist. Now, would that just not blow you away? Wow. That makes my hair raise on end. What an opportunity. So Leonard Susskind, he's big stuff. He's been dealing with these wonderful minds in science and cosmology now for decades, and he is now one of the big ones. He's quite a good read. Well, he said Dave was arguing that the vacuum was full of zero-point energy, and that this energy ought to affect the gravitational field. And Dirac didn't like this idea of vacuum energy because whenever physicists tried to calculate its magnitude, the answer would come out infinite. And he thought, of course, that if it came out infinite, the mathematics must be wrong, and that the right answer is that there is no vacuum energy. Well, Susskind argues that there is a vacuum energy. And this is a point that Ervin Laszlo brings out in a very interesting interpretation of quantum physics that I will get to eventually. And of course, what do you call them? See, I have the problem of labeling people too, and it's probably not fair. I don't know how else to say this, but an orthodox Western scientist would consider Ervin Laszlo as New Agey BS. Well, his interpretation is different, but the cosmology that Ervin Laszlo is coming out now is discussed by Leonard Susskind. In many respects, very similar. Yeah, they say it in different words, but it's pretty much the same thing. And I want to try to get to Ervin Laszlo. I don't know, I've already been going on a half an hour. I'll have to do another podcast on that. Page 74. Energy is the source of the gravitational field. In other words, all forms of energy affect the gravitational field and therefore also influence the motion of nearby masses. The vacuum energy of quantum field theory is no exception. Even empty space will have a gravitational field if the energy density of the vacuum is not zero. And it's not. Objects will move through empty space as if there were a force on them. The interesting thing is that if the vacuum energy is a positive number, then its effect is a universal repulsion, a kind of anti-gravity that would tend to drive galaxies apart. This is exactly what we said of the cosmological constant earlier, you will recall. Incidentally, Einstein's greatest blunder, advocating the cosmological constant, has now been found to be one of his greatest discoveries, and Susskind brings back Einstein's cosmological constant into the equation of cosmology, and in invoking the cosmological constant, associating it with string theory, Susskind also pulls together, astonishingly, the idea of the anthropic principle. And this is taboo to cosmologists and scientists. They say, no lovin' way. Well, now we have one of the greatest saying, oh yeah. Oh yes, in a very powerful way. The anthropic principle cannot be dismissed in this new paradigm of the cosmic landscape. And this takes us off into an infinity of universes. It's an astonishing book to read. Highly recommend Susskind. He'll open your mind. Whew. Well, anyway, this point, and here he really drives it home. He's really wanting you to get the point, because he says, this point is so important that I want to stop and explain it to you again. So take a seat. I'm going to reread this, except in other words. If, in fact, empty space is filled with vacuum energy, or vacuum mass, it will exert forces on objects that are indistinguishable from the effects